EU4 1.34 has been announced, and boy is this a big one. There's a lot of changes coming in the next update and the attached flavor pack, as it will include new missions, events, and privileges for most of the countries surrounding the Baltic Sea, including the Teutons, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Livonians, and some revamped flavor for older nations. We've just gotten a little bit of the information about the next DLC, and we're gonna go through it today, as well as we'll be discussing what very likely will come. And yes, I'm talking about the addition of the Norse religion as an alternate path for Nordic countries. Back on the 3rd of May, they made the first announcement about the upcoming Northern Europe focused DLC. Before we go through the Teutonic missions that they've talked about in detail in this dev diary, we need to talk about something very important here. Paradox made some hints about what's going to be arriving with the next DLC, and we're going to go through these hints one by one. First off, they talk about the special units such as the Kawa units that the Ethiopians have, which were added in the Origins DLC, which was also a flavor pack more than anything else, with a lot of new missions and so on. And they do mention how they want to add more of these special units and experiment with them. This is my understanding that they will likely add something the sorts of Prussian infantry with extra discipline as a special unit. I mean, we have Russian special units, Asian special units, Ethiopian special units, but everybody knows about the famous Prussians, yet we don't have them in the game just yet, and this will be a Prussia inclusive expansion pack. So I'm pretty sure we're gonna see at least Prussian or Swedish special units in the next flavor pack. They also mentioned the mission tree that Mali has from the Origins DLC, where you get a massive disaster and your country has to navigate through that disaster in order to come out a better country. And it does offer a challenge, and I personally really enjoyed that mission pack that they added. They also mentioned that they're gonna add a similar situation for the upcoming DLC, and we even see a little bit of this in the Teutonic mission tree down below. They also talk about the fact that they want to add more privileges like the religious diplomats, and the most foretelling of all of this intro to the dev diary is this particular paragraph over here. They talk about the history of the Teutonic Order, how they got called in by Duke Conrad of Mazovia in 1225 to convert the old Prussians to Catholicism, well, to Christianity at the time, and then how it eventually turned into Prussia and Germanized the area. But at the end of this phrase, they mentioned that the mission tree of the order is less about recreating history and more about the what if. And they also mention, not only here, but also if you go through some of the comments from the developers and people working for Paradox, that this is the direction with the following DLC to EU4. The most what if scenario for Nordic Europe is, of course, having Viking Norse brought back. So I do seriously expect there being a choice to convert back to the Norse religion for certain Nordic countries through their mission trees or through some events or disaster. Now let's start going into the mission tree. As you see, the Teutonic Order's mission tree is very, very different. Like, you have some missions at the start, 6 missions, the basic ones, and based on the choices that you make during these 6 missions, the rest of the mission tree shows up. The Teutonic Order essentially has like 4 mission trees, and the mission tree changes based on your decisions and how you mold your country's future with this mission tree. It's absolutely mind-blowing how much work went into this particular mission tree for the Teutonic Order. And speaking for myself, I love the Teutonic Order in Prussia. I love Brandenburg. I love that area in particular, and I'm super happy to see that this is literally the biggest and most interactive and diverse mission tree I've ever seen in EU4. So the starting missions obviously are very easy to understand, and they even give out a detail about how they're gonna go. First off, you still have the Danzig disaster with the Prussian Confederation. It does start a little differently. It starts in 1446 as a disaster, and the moment that it starts, it behaves the same like it does in the current version. Basically, the burghers get 10% crownlands, and in order to make sure they don't take over the country and you don't have Danzig break away as a separate country, you need to have 40% crownlands by by 1460. Unless they change something along the way, this is how it's going to be in the next patch as well. You also have a mission which allows you to join the HRE, and if you join the HRE via that mission, this one over here, Seek Imperial Protection, then the Emperor gets 3 options. They can let you join the Empire with no restrictions, or they can let you join the Empire, but you're not allowed to attack any sort of HRE nation. Plus, if you do attack anybody, and you're not allowed, remember, then it's considered an offensive war against the entirety of the HRE. So that means the Emperor is going to be defending whoever you're attacking, and all of the allies of the Emperor are also going to be defending that country. It's a special status for the HRE, that is for sure, and I'm curious to see if we're going to see more countries with this special status, because end of the day, Burgundy had a similar status. They were both a count under the HRE and a duke under the French crown, so maybe we're going to see something like that in the future patch for the Burgundians, where they cannot attack any HRE nation, but they are a part of the HRE, so if France attacks them, then Austria defends them. If you decide to join the HRE via the HRE interface, the same thing happens, where the Emperor is going to give you basically the option to join as long as you don't attack anybody. And they make a cheeky remark here about a lot of guides will have to be rewritten now that the HRE is no longer a viable expansion path in the early game. Yes, I fully agree. A lot of guides will definitely have to be rewritten. Another mission there, which is defeat Poland. You need to either defeat the Polish armies in 3 battles or take 4 of their provinces, and in return you unlock 2 parts of your mission tree. Essentially, you can either go via the Prussian path or the Crusader path. Now, there's gonna be more divergent paths along the way. These are the first 2 divergent paths, which have a massive influence on the future of your nation. It also has mentioned how you can get a Livonian alliance that can turn into a vassalization of Livonia. Historically speaking, the Livonian Order was a part of the Teutonic Order. It was in fact a vassal of the Teutonic Order and should be one at the start of the game, but apparently you can vassalize them via your mission tree, so that is good to hear. And considering the fact that you have 3 missions that branch out into the 4th mission here, I highly suspect that you're gonna have to do all 3 of these missions in order to get rid of some other sort of disaster that they don't mention right now, but this is just speculation, to be fair. Now, if you choose the Prussian path of your mission tree when you have to make the decision after defeating Poland, well, you get the Prussian mission tree here, which essentially is a standard mission tree revolving around the Prussian nation and how you're going to get a very professional army, a lot of discipline. You're an army with the state, essentially. Yala yala. This is the historical version of the mission tree. As you can see, the left side of this mission tree is still hidden. That is because after you do the Order and the Empire mission, you're going to get 3 different options, and based on those 3 different options, you get 3 different sets of missions again. So these are going to be option 1, the diplomatic path, where you essentially can subjugate and weasel your way into the Empire towards eventually becoming the Emperor, and we'll see about this in a few seconds. The second option is Germanic conquest. You basically go full on rampage, you get permanent claims on the entirety of the Holy Roman Empire, and you conquer and you form historical Germany. And the third option is the Prussian kingdom path, and they talk in detail about what the ramifications of each of these paths are. First off, the German conquest path essentially is a hack and slash style conquest of the HRE with claims on everything, and at the end you get an Iron and Blood mission which offers 25% governing capacity modifier, which offsets the 50% governing capacity malus from the Prussian monarchy. Remember that you still have that around. If you go down the Holy Roman diplomacy path, which is the first path, remember, then at first you'll be able to get a subjugation CB on Brandenburg. After you've subjugated them, you're gonna have to become an elector, and there's 2 ways you can eventually become an elector. First off, you can either declare war on the Austrians, or whatever is the emperor, declare war on them with the claim electoralship CB, which is a special CB from this mission only, and it essentially makes you an elector. Or you can buy the electoralship. It costs 6,000 ducats. It gives you a lot of opinions and trust with the emperor, but 6,000 ducats is a lot of money, and you cannot have loans when you purchase the electoralship. So I do think it's a little bit too expensive, especially since I'm assuming this is going to happen early on in the game, right? Once you have done the mission becoming elector, which is again the third mission from the diplomatic path, path, you're going to become a kingdom as well. So that means if you are a bishopric, because remember, we now have the special Teutonic bishopric government reform, which is a different type of bishopric that offers war exhaustion reduction and manpower in true faith provinces, as well as you can make your heirs and rulers generals, which is unique for bishoprics. And this is going to make it into an archbishopric, which is the kingdom rank for bishoprics essentially. That happens after you become an elector. Then you can join the League War, which is a little bit later down the line. You can also secularize Prussia, which is exactly what it sounds like. Essentially, once you have your fourth reform, you can choose to become a Protestant Prussian nation with the regular Prussian government type that we know. And then eventually you can take the imperial crown and unite the Holy Roman Empire. It shows here as well, Protestant becomes a new state religion of the Teutonic Order, and you change to a monarchy, as well as you get the bonuses that the Prussians get, including the militarization mechanic and the governing capacity debuff. Once you do your fourth level government reform, have 2 stability, tech level 10, and Protestantism has spawned. So this is going to be a little bit later, probably 1520s or so, or earlier if Protestantism spawned earlier, of course. Now, the last branching of this is the Prussian one. Remember, we got diplomatic, conquest of Germany or HRE, and then Prussian one. And the Prussian one is essentially the coolest one because you get to conquer all of the Lithuanian, Polish, Moldavian, and basically Commonwealth lands. You get claims on all of that and can establish a Prussian empire. They set you conquest spree against Poland, Lithuania, etc. You get 2 unique estate privileges as well. Essentially the Grand Orthodoxy autonomy, which behaves like the Dhimmi behaves for the Muslims, where Orthodox and Coptic provinces do not contribute towards religious unity, but you cannot convert them either. And the fortified Dnieper mission is insane. It allows for up to 5 provinces with a fort along the Dnieper to have 50% defensiveness and 25 garrison size, as well as fort maintenance minus 90%. Essentially, they are free forts by the river, protecting your borders from the vile whatever is after the Dnieper. You also get, of course, claims all over the Commonwealth, essentially a Prussian, Polish, Lithuanian Commonwealth. So that is the Prussian side of the mission tree. Remember at the start that you got to choose between going Prussian or Teutonic. So now we're going to discuss what happens if you stay Teutonic and not Prussian. This is the mission tree. This is exactly what it looks like if you decide to go full on Teutonic. And as you can see, it is very different. It does not revolve around any sort of historical adaptation. And this last mission here, Crusaders of the Steppes, is insanely overpowered. Likely will make this nation the most powerful nation in the game. So the main idea of this Crusader path is to Christianize the pagans and the heathens in the east. And it is essentially the what if version of the mission tree or branch of the mission tree. What am I talking about? This is a completely new mission tree. First off, you can become a Crusader order, which is a special, unique government reform again, with some insane modifiers. You also get mounted Crusader army that until the end of the game gives you massive bonuses for your cavalry force, as well as movement speed and army tradition +1. And the last mission I was talking about, you become a holy horde, which is a unique type of horde. It is a Crusader Christian horde that is allowed to raise land like normal hordes and has 2 extra missionaries and 20% movement speed, as well as manpower in true faith provinces +25. So this government reform is better than the regular horde reforms and is basically tailored for a one faith, one culture world conquest, if you ask me. It also allows for horde idea groups. So if you're smart, you can mix in the horde idea group with the divine idea group that you start with for the extra modifiers when you do that one faith, one culture. It does mean that you have to stay Catholic if you go for the Holy Horde. And there's something you need to keep in mind. You can only raise provinces of heathen and heretics. So that means you cannot raise Catholic provinces, but everybody else in the world is fair game, which makes it very interesting in my opinion. And they do make a good point here. You're going to get reform a little bit later, so you're not going to get too much mana points from raising like you do at the beginning. Remember that depending on your technology level, you get less mana points when raising provinces as you go up in and military tech. They also acknowledge the fact that Catholicism has been buffed quite a little bit, and they will definitely add new aspects for the other religions. The Protestants, Reformed, and Anglicans, they show some new ones here, and I have to say that I'm really happy with what I'm seeing here, especially for the English. Anglicanism is going to help them out so much. Land morale and shock damage decrease. Colonies gain 100 population is amazing too, especially if you're going to go colonial as the English. Increase innovativeness and reform progress gain is great as well. And there's a special new mechanic where whenever you divorce your consort, it's going to give you a bit of mana points depending on your monarch's mana points. So the worse your monarch, the more mana points you get essentially. If he's a 666, don't expect any mana point. The Livonian mission tree, on the other hand, is extremely similar to the Teutonic one in the sense that it has a lot of what if scenarios, and it is a massive mission tree that includes a ton of missions. And like the previous one for the Teutons, it's actually 3 different mission trees into one depending on what choices you go for. They do acknowledge that in 1444 the Livonian Confederation had 4 different bishoprics and the Archbishopric of Riga within it, but they cannot show that on the map itself because there's no more provinces coming to EU4 ever, and they're just working with what they have right now. Because of that, they're actually adding privileges to represent each of the different bishopric and archbishopric. And speaking of this, one of the biggest game-changing features coming in 1.34 is the fact that there's 6 privileges that you can have now instead of 4 for your estates. So that means every single meta has changed and all the estate metas are completely different now, so a lot of guides are gonna have to be rewritten for sure. Apparently you can cancel these privileges by having 100 ducats and no loans, and you just go to your national decisions. It will trigger some different events which will make you lose money, and it might even lose you some stability or spawn in some rebels. Regardless, once you finish all of that, you can do the mission that branches out the entire mission tree into 2, and you have the Livonian Order mission part and the Crusader part. The Livonian missions are essentially divided in 2 parts here. We have the colonization of the New World, and essentially it allows you to establish a Livonian Order, New World Order, let's call it. That's a double order right there for you in case you didn't notice. And the other part essentially revolves around dealing with the Hanseatic League and reforming into Livonia eventually. It also mentions that in case you have a random new world and not the regular world, then the missions change and they just say settle the new world instead of settle North America. Also talks about what privileges and what bonuses you get from completing some of the missions. They're pretty interesting and they're pretty diverse. That's the best part about it. Once you secularize the Livonian Order, you change over to Livonia, and here's the really cool part about it. You can reform your government, and you're gonna have 6 events that you're gonna go through, and based on these 6 events and the choices that you go for in these events, you actually have 10 different government reforms that you can enact, and some of them are insane, like this one over here, dev cost reduction, marine force limit plus 50%, and monarch diplo skill plus 2, but you get the same debuff that the Prussians get, and there's a lot of them here. I recommend you guys go through them yourselves. And it just goes to show that you can play the Livonian Order 10 different times, and every time you can have a different outcome with your reforms. Aside from the Livonian Ocean tree, you can also choose the Crusader one, remember, and the Crusader one is a very weird one because it allows you to play toll whilst still conquering a lot of lands. It focuses on taking over most of the Russian lands and the Baltics, and it has some unique reforms that are absolutely overpowered. I like how this one's called an army with the monastery to simulate the army with the state from the Prussians. They even mentioned they want to turn the Livonians into a tall crusader state, and to that effect they have the privileged religious conscription that offers 15 manpower in provinces with the church or 33 in provinces with a cathedral. So that means people are going to start actually building churches and cathedrals now, not like like in the previous patches. You also have a special government reform crusading empire that offers another 33% manpower in true faith provinces and a permanent CB against heathen heretics, so you don't need to unlock the religious ideas to get that Deus Vult CB anymore. It also mentions how there's going to be 3 new aspects for Protestants and a temporary bonus once you get your aspects for 10 years, after which it goes away. But this way you can actually just recycle your aspects and always get the bonus. Let's see if they change this or not. It does say that it's not final on this matter. And Reformed also gets a couple more bonuses: trade steering, dev cost reduction, and manpower recovery speed. All 3 are really good, and I have to be honest, this definitely makes Reformed a lot better, because right now in the current patch, the Reformed religion is the weakest out of all the Protestant religions. They show the national ideas for the new countries, Livonia and Karelia, and the map color for Livonia, as well as they mentioned that the Grand Orthodox autonomy privilege that was unique to the Teutons is now going to be available to the Polish, Lithuanians, and the Venetians, and the ability to just get the electoralship if your vassal is an elector in the HRE going to be a universal feature now, not only restricted to the Teutonic Order, since a lot of people did comment about how they really like that idea and feature. Now remember though, this is going to lead to a lot of exploits, because 6,000 ducats to get electoralship, for example, if it is available to everybody, is very cheap for certain countries, and they can easily do that. Next week we got Riga and some extra government reforms. Apparently they don't mention what the flavor pack's going to be called, but I do strongly suspect it's going to be either Vikings or something of the sort. It sounds cool, and even if it's not Vikings, it's still going to be Vikings in my mind, okay? I also expect this to arrive in about 5-6 months most likely, since they haven't even started discussing the Swedish mission trees and so on, and those are going to be the really juicy ones, where we will learn more about the what if Norse religion paths that I'm sure will exist. And I have to say that I'm really happy to see this, because it is a massive leap for EU4, and it does show that when EU5 comes out, they really are listening to the player base, and they know that we want something that's more engaging and more entertaining, fun, not the same old conquer this, get claim on that type of mission. And this is just the beginning of this new patch. I'm really curious to see what comes up after, and I want to give a big shout out to the entire Paradox Tinto team that are working hard on this. I know no one from Paradox probably watches my videos, but I am very happy to see that my favorite game is getting the love that it deserves. Click this if you want to learn more about EU5, and I really want to thank all my patrons, channel members, and Twitch subscribers for the amazing support you guys have been offering. I really wouldn't be able to maintain this channel without all of your help.